is Vayigash. Literally translated means Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda approached him. This is referring to the incident, the latest incident, between the brothers and the so far anonymous Yosef, the brother. In other words, they have no idea yet that they're confronting their brother that they had sold, and now, since Joseph had brought Binyamin, his brother meaning from one mother and one father, down into Egypt, and through some scheme, he's had Binyamin brought down as well. And now he'd placed some articles into the bag of Binyamin, and now he, Binyamin particularly, is considered a criminal, obviously stealing for something from stealing a wine cup from the household of Pharaoh. And Joseph says now that he will, Binyamin, whom Jacob feared to send down into Egypt because he said that he had lost one son, Joseph, and he doesn't want to lose a second one. And now Yehuda is approaching him and begins to plead with him. And he begins to repeat the conversation that they had. And he begins to, there's really no reason in his plea, I guess, for the release of his brother. He tells him the whole story. And also says that in case my father will not see the return of his youngest son, Binyamin, he will die. Because he himself, Yehuda, claimed that he would be personally responsible for his return. And therefore he will sin for the rest of his days. And how can I return? And the Zohar asks, and we begin off by reading a little of the Zohar, just to make the connection to what the Parsha is about. And then it says, V'leyochal Yosef l'hit apek. Hearing this plea from Yehuda, he no longer could control himself, meaning to conceal the idea from his brothers that he is the missing Joseph, that he has now achieved being second in command to Pharaoh. He is the one who is manipulating this entire scene. And the Zohar says, Tochazi, just for the making the connection, I want to read the Aramaic. And therefore it says, Joseph, hearing these words of Yehuda, he no longer could lihitapek. And all of the commentators translate it literally. He no longer could control. In front of all those who were standing in front of him, and he asked that they remove all of the people, all of the Egyptians, in other words. For now, he is going to have to admit to his brothers who he is. What happened here is what the Zohar is raising the question. What happened here that suddenly Yehuda, upon remarking about this scenario, which he is well familiar with, Yosef. He knows the story. And what did he intend to accomplish by telling him about their hardships? I mean, it's like a criminal comes into court and says, I didn't have any money, and that's why I stole. What kind of an excuse is that? You just don't steal. If that's against the law, you don't steal. And why is he making an attempt to plead upon his sympathy? And the Zohar interprets it somewhat differently. That when it says Vayigash of Yehuda, doesn't mean just that Yehuda is approaching him and pleading the case. While we know that throughout history, this has always been really the scene in which the Jews generally find themselves throughout history, in which they have to plead as victims to their oppressors. And now Yehuda is approaching Joseph with the same kind of idea. And the Zohar says, no, that's not what the Torah is telling us in this case here. Because as we have already learned on many occasions, that reading the Torah itself, reading the story of the Torah, has no meaning. And certainly in this case it has no meaning, because he goes on to a lengthy discussion about how one brother was lost, and the father says, don't come back again, and my entire life is wrapped up in this one little boy. Why should this all interest Yosef? I mean, assuming that Yosef is a stranger, why should this interest Yosef? Just like the criminal claiming that, I was an orphan. Yes, they try to do it, I guess, but nevertheless, if he's a grown man and he understands the severity of committing a crime, then all of these pleas go unanswered. Although let's say a defense lawyer in many cases tries to play upon the sympathy of the jury in presenting this kind of an idea, but nevertheless, the crime was committed. How did he believe that in pleading this case, that then Joseph no longer can control himself? As if Joseph didn't know, didn't understand everything that was being said here. And at this point, as opposed to the scenario before his plea at this time, remember that the brothers had come down and the whole story. He didn't feel this compassion, although it says he did feel this compassion before, but that didn't make any difference to him personally, that he would now divulge who he is. After Yehuda approaches him with the same story again, now suddenly the Torah tells us that he couldn't control himself. What struck a chord here as opposed to what went on before? It says the Zohar that we're discussing not the story, we're discussing the future of mankind. We're also discussing how mankind, if he is to avoid future problems, what can be the necessary tools that he can become a survivor rather than a victim. This is what the Zohar says, is what referring here to this incident here. And when it says Vayigash elav Yehuda, Yehuda, as we know, is from the family of Malchut Beit David. From his family comes the Mashiach, Ben David. Joseph is, as we have learned on many occasions, is the one who furnishes the sustenance for the world. The Sfirat Yesod. If we are to make contact with the Sfirat Yesod, and this is always our hope, and this is what prayers are about, is to make this kind of a connection with Yosef, meaning the place that is referred to as Eitz HaChayim. And once we've made that connection with Eitz HaChayim, then we become included within that realm of reality. And in that realm, it is already known that there are no problems. There are no problems. So when Yehuda approached, it doesn't mean Yehuda as an individual, as the brother, now coming to appeal to the sympathy of this man whom they don't know, because it didn't make any difference. The story is not important. What is important is that the Torah is trying to give us a game plan in our daily lives, not merely to record a piece of history, which for us today really has no meaning. And how does that assist us in now making decisions today? And says the Zohar, Shahayesod shenikra Yosef lo yachol letapek shelo latet lahem, because Yesod, as the Zohar says in other cases, and here again, Yesod is the provider. Yosef assembles all of the different light energies of the light force. Yosef brings together the fragmentation of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, and Hod, brings them together, gathers all of these energies, combines them into one unified whole, and then furnishes and shares the beneficence of God to Malchut, to the world that we exist, in the world that we exist. And what it means here, that Lo Yachol Yosef Litapek, meaning Joseph, and this is what the Torah is teaching us, the light force can never control itself. It always has this desire to share. But then again, the question is, but look around us. We see more of chaos than we see of order. And if this is the case, that there's a constant consciousness on the part of Yesod to furnish us with our sustenance, and I'm not speaking about food, I'm speaking about all of the necessities that mankind has at any given time. Certainly doesn't appear to be the case as Lo Yochol Yosef Litapek, that the light force is constantly looking where he can fulfill a vacuum, where he can fulfill a need. And here the Torah says the Zohar could no longer control himself. He could no longer control himself. And what does this have to do when it says, Lo Amad Ish Ito, and he didn't want, and no person was there at the time, no person was there. You must understand, you have to listen closely to the words. When Joseph admitted, or Joseph became known to his brothers, and what's the difference? Well, Rashi says on the spot, because Lo HaYochol Lizvol Sheyu Misriim Nisavim Alav. He couldn't bear to have the Egyptians present when he would admit that this is Joseph, the brother they sold, and now the Egyptians are here. Look what happened in this case. Brothers sell a brother. And that's how Rashi interprets it. However, and because they would be embarrassed. That's all Rashi says. Because they would be embarrassed. Therefore, he didn't want them present. What happened later? And he raised his voice, or he gave his voice in tears. Vayishmu Misrayim, Vayishma Beit Paro. Everyone knew about it. Here it says he didn't want them present. And then it says in this next verse that all of Egypt, all of the house of Pharaoh, heard the story. Well, the reason he asked these people to leave was that they shouldn't hear. This is what Rashi said, that they shouldn't hear about the story, that these are his brothers. And everyone knows that they were there before, and Joseph did not admit to them that he was his brother, he was their brothers. And he didn't want him to be there. Doesn't make any sense. Says the Zohar, it has nothing to do, obviously, with the story. Again, Zohar continues on with his position that the story is never the intent of the message, but rather he interprets this idea that he didn't want the Egyptians to be present. V'lo amad ish ito b'hitvada Yosef el achiv. Ito. What does it mean, ito? With him. Zu Knesset Yisrael shehi anukva. Shlo amad ish ita. Dahainu be'eta zivug. What are we talking about here? B'hitvada, when he would become known. Now, if you remember, in Genesis, we, on the verse, chapter 4, verse 1, Adam yada et Chava. If you recall it, that's the familiar Zohar. And Adam knew Eve, and she became pregnant. Zohar says, that's really a miracle. Just by knowing Eve, it's another story we heard recently about 2,000 years ago, about a virgin Eve. Imagine, he just knew her, and she became pregnant. Says the Zohar, that can never happen. Just saying, I'm not here to nullify or the validity of another religion. I'm just saying that the Zohar makes it clear that one cannot become pregnant unless there was sexual intercourse. Says the Zohar. Then what does it mean Adam knew Eve? That knowing, says the Torah, is connection. In other words, if you do not understand something, although you may have made a connection, then it's what we call merely a case of information. If this doesn't become part of you, you hear it, you know it. When I say I know it, meaning you've gathered in all the information. You understand it. But you haven't made a connection, because yada means connection. Knowing is the connection. But there's got to be connection. If there is connection, you live by that information. But just to gather more information and more information until you're exploding with information, but you're never making use of that information. It doesn't affect you. It has no bearing with your same garbage that you've done yesterday, the day before. Now you've gathered all the spiritual information. Shouldn't the person have changed this much? Well, if he's Jewish, it's a problem. But generally speaking, with this kind of information, and we all agree the information is absolutely correct, and it's worthwhile, and so on. And we see people continue to behave like it said in last week's Parsha, which is, I failed to mention that last week, that when the 7 healthy, fat cows emerge, And following these 7 healthy cows emerged 7 underfed, weak-looking, ugly-looking cows. They devour the 7 healthy cows. And the Torah says, and Pharaoh says, you couldn't tell the difference. They had swallowed up, imagine swallowing up a whole cow. You think that these cows would look a little different, and so on. It says the Zohar there too. Just because we've devoured the information doesn't mean there's going to be any change. You remain the same. I've seen it. You have all the information in the world. Then it's only feeding your ego. Now you can go and tell everybody what you've learned and what you know and so on. But here the Torah is telling us, right here, that not only is there a change within you, but even this information that you're now desirous of sharing, it hasn't affected you. You haven't changed, but now you want to save the world. You can't save yourself, so at least you have an ambition. You want to save the rest of the world. And over here, he says, there is no zivug. There is no connection with anyone where this information will be shared. No one. No one. Therefore, the Zohar goes ahead and says that you're permitted to learn and study Kabbalah even from someone who doesn't know. What's the purpose in going to study with someone who doesn't know what he's teaching? He doesn't understand. He reads the Zohar. He doesn't know. Doesn't know what it says. Because that person may very well be a person that is connected. So he's not connected on the 4% egotistical level. He's just acting as a channel. He's making the connection. Their information, even if he doesn't understand it, but he's gathered that information, and when he shares it, it's not with ego. You see who I am? Because the people with ego affect no one in the world. No one in the world. So over here, when it says, Loma Amad Ish Ito, you would think no one else knew, but again, remember we raised the question. It says that right in the next verse, everyone knew. What is he talking about? Because here we're talking about a connection between Yehuda and Yosef. Yehuda made this connection with him. And what does connection mean? This knowledge that when this connection is made, you connect with the Etz HaChaim. You feel the Etz HaChaim. It's not an ego trip. Not an ego trip. But it makes an impression upon you. You're connecting with it. This knowledge is something that you feel, you live by. In that case, the whole world will know about it. The whole world will know about it. It didn't mean here that he didn't want no one to be there present. It has nothing to do with that. He's talking about now the connection between Yehuda and Yosef, Malchut and Yisod. Once that connection is made, not on an intelligent level, not on an intellectual level, it become part of him. He lives by this doctrine. What's the doctrine of Yisod? Sharing. Sharing. This individual who knows nothing but has an intent of sharing, when he reads that Zohar, people will feel as if they had acquired knowledge. How could they feel they've acquired knowledge? The man doesn't even know what he's reading. Because then he's acting as a channel. The information, and he is connecting with this. Well, how can you connect with something and he doesn't know what it's all about? He connected insofar as a true desire just to share. He knows he doesn't know. He knows he doesn't know, because that is not what makes connection, is understanding. Well, now I understand it. Therefore, now I can share it. Doesn't even require that. It requires what Kabbalah teaches us. A subjection of the me, and it becomes we. There's no me. It's now we. This whole idea here that he's not pleading, incidentally. Not pleading to Joseph, whom he doesn't know, and why should this man have any sympathy for him? But the idea here that is being expressed is not the idea of pleading his case. That his father, it's like you come into court and you say the father of the defendant will become ill because if his son goes to jail for committing an awful crime. Have we ever heard that this should have an effect upon the jury or the judge? Because his father will be affected. What does that have to do with the crime that was committed? And consequently, what he's telling us here has nothing to do with Yehuda pleading the case for the release of his brother Binyamin. Ki zivug mechuna yediyah. Zivug, connection, is also another code name for yediyah, for knowing. Knowing. What does it mean here, his brothers? He's telling Joseph about his brothers. The little one is not here and all. What is all that about? Talking about his brothers? First of all, this whole story already was told through this man whom we know to be Joseph, and they didn't know. This story was already repeated before. And now what's his intent in repeating again? Says the Zohar. He's talking about his brothers. We're not talking about brothers. Elihim shar ha-mekavot va-tzavoot shekatuv behem leman achai v're'ai koloma shebishvilam nizdaveg im hanukva lavtek lehem shifam. This is again nothing new for those of us who have been coming on Shabbat and listening to Moshe as he repeats the message of each week, which is not the story. But that when we feel connected, or we feel secure, we're always feeling secure. We're always feeling we're on top of the world until the moment comes when we don't feel we're on top of the world. But don't think for a moment that means we no longer feel we're on top of the world. Suddenly you're hit with a financial problem, going bankrupt. Does that change the person? No. It doesn't. Why? Because tomorrow's another day. And tomorrow he will understand that he can rise up to the occasion and retrieve all the health and all the financial stability and everything else. He'll have it back again. Says the Torah, to make this connection and to have what we call financial stability, health, etc., involves a quantum connection. A quantum connection. When it says his brothers and so on, he's not talking about his personal brothers. Says the Zohar, he's talking about Hamed Kavot Vatzavot. He's talking about every force in this whole universe. Without a connection to every force in the whole of the universe, You haven't made a connection to nothing. Nothing. You may believe that you have matters under control. You may think that your logic, your sensibility will bring you to a particular place. And the answer is, all of these different things that he believes, that Yehuda, who represents Malchut, talking about us. He's not talking about some Yehuda, a storybook, where there's a fellow about Yehuda pleading for his brother. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with us. When we're pleading to ourselves, when we're talking to ourselves, and we're talking to God, we think we're talking to God. Because Yosef represents Yesod, the coming together of the different energies of the light force, which must be brought together into the sphere of Yesod. And when that is brought together, connections, then, and only then, Joseph can no longer withhold the abundance, says the Zohar, shedding of all of this beneficence to the individual. So, we're not discussing here this idea of a story and pleading a case. But every aspect here, every aspect that is being discussed, or in his plea, so to speak, is discussing how you and I should understand within our daily life that every moment of our existence, no matter how brilliant we are, no matter how knowledgeable we are as if we have nothing. And that's what he was telling us. Nobody has anything. There isn't anything. No security, no nothing. We're empty. And so he's supposedly pleading, therefore, to help me. Says the Zohar, that's not what he's saying. When he comes to the realization, and that's not easy to come by. Remember, the little ego over there, some got it bigger, some have it a little less, but that little ego is always telling you, you have nothing? Well, what about the book that you just purchased? Doesn't that belong to you? In a minute you can lose it. 1 minute. You could be robbed, chas v'shalom. I mean, what do we possess? What is that which we possess? Are we at the same time saying, well then, if we don't possess anything, then let's remove all of our possessions? And no, that's not what the Torah is trying to tell us. The Torah is trying to tell us that until you come to an understanding that you possess nothing, it is then that Malo Yochod Yosef Litapek L'Kol HaNitzavei Malav, that all of these negative factors, Murphy's Law, if anything can go wrong, will go wrong. And that's the life story of every individual. Anything can go wrong. Why will it go wrong? Because there's always negative energy forces in this world constantly. Why do we wear a red string all day? Wear it when you're going outside. Wear it when you're not so sure. Why do you wear it all day and all night? What for? Because this is to not only to act as the consciousness of Rachel, Joseph's mother, who serves a purpose in channeling this protective energy that we seek, but also to remind us that no matter what you have, what you possess, don't think is yours. For any given moment, at any given moment, it can all be gone. At a given moment, it can all be gone. It's happened throughout, especially for the Jew, and this is the story of the Jew in what he is relating here. That at any given moment, everything is gone. Gone with the wind, as if it never existed. Not only is it that after 120 years, most people go out of this world as if they never existed. And all of their achievements and accomplishments, what they believed during the course of their lifetime, did they believe that, look what they accomplished. And no one even knows of their existence. No one remembers that they ever were alive. Because they really possess nothing. It's the old rule. Those who possess don't possess. Those who do not possess everything. That's the paradox of life, isn't it? But remember, to breathe in, there's a rule. You've got to breathe out. To receive, the bulb says you must restrict. All of these paradoxes. This is information, but if we do not live with it, then we do not come to the position where the Zohar says, Lo yochol Yosef litapek, not that he couldn't control his emotions. Nothing to do with a little story of a reunion of a family that is now becoming united. But rather, the light force of God through Joseph is constantly making an effort to become part of us. And we go on our merry way. We think we have everything. Now, the moment you think we should understand, says the Torah here, that as long as he's saying, I have this, I have that, then the light force of God says, well, then this man doesn't need. Whatever we have, then he certainly has no need or no desire. There's no compelling force that says, give me more, share with me. It is only when I really don't have, that I believe I don't have. When is that? When there's a bankruptcy proceeding in court. But until then, if I have $14 billion, do I have to plead to the light force to become connected with me? Because, says the Zohar, more than we want the light force, or Yesod, Joseph, to connect and support and nourish us, he has a greater desire to nourish us. More than our desire for his nourishment. More than our desire for his nourishment. But we never learn. We do the same things, same stupid things over and over and over again. Never learn. Never learn. But at least once a year, when we read Vayigash, the Zohar says, we're trying to come to these, to the problems that are at hand, and that's why at times we will even plead, as if we're not deserving. We plead. We plead for things that we really don't have a need for, because in the back of our minds we feel very secure. Therefore, King David, when he said the prayer of poor people, prayers of poor people are heard more so than any other people. Why? Just because someone doesn't have money, it means therefore he has a greater need, and therefore God listens to him. You mean, what about someone who's sick? What about someone who's got cancer? So he's not poor. Let's say he's a billionaire, but he's got cancer. And he doesn't fit into the category of being a poor person. Ask the Zohar. What does it say? Tefillah la'ani. The King David says that the prayers of a poor person, is heard more so than someone who is going downhill and now needs the support and assistance of the light force. No, well, he doesn't listen to him. He listens first to the poor man. says the Zohar. Tefillah la'ani, and without the Zohar we wouldn't understand what King David was referring to. Says the Zohar, Tefillah la'ani is talking about King David at the time when he was fleeing from Shaul, his father-in-law, who wanted to kill him. He had no possessions. He had nothing that he could say was his. Maybe the shirt on his back, and even that he wasn't sure about. He was a man that felt that he had nothing. And that's what tefillah la'ani doesn't mean someone who what constitutes a poor man? For someone who had billions and now he's only got a couple 100 million, you talk to him, he might even say, he's poor compared to what? So what constitutes being poor? What constitutes being poor is that you have nothing. You have nothing. Does that mean then before our prayers can be heard by God, is that we must relinquish all of our possessions? No, says the Zohar. But to be in that constant frame of reference that I possess nothing, not health, not wealth, not social relationships, nothing, because at any given moment, all of that can be gone. That's why it's considered to be tefillah la'ani. And therefore, this whole story, remember I said he was pleading his case? He wasn't pleading his case. Why should this man go scot-free because he's pleading what we think? He's trying to tell you. He's trying to teach us that when you want lo yochod Yosef letapek, when you want that the light force says I can't control this consciousness of my extreme desire constantly to share. Now, here it is. Yehuda is saying I've got nothing. Nobody has anything. There's no social, there's no relationships, there's no money, there's nothing. When you reach that stage that you have nothing, that you really feel that at any given moment you have nothing, then let me hear, what does that mean? I have no knowledge, I have nothing. It says nothing, the word ani is not being measured by this poorness, is not being measured in terms of money. You have nothing. Your knowledge is nothing. Your knowledge is nothing. Not only your health is nothing. Not only the money you possess today, tomorrow could be nothing. Your ego is nothing. I have nothing. When a person can achieve that, he's an Eitz HaChaim. But, right here, it's teaching us too, that human nature is that even if his life depends on it, there's the one thing that a human being does not want to be removed from. Little ego, his little dignity. Even when his life depends on it. Even when his life depends on it. Because he's saying here, I have told my father that I would be responsible if I don't bring him back. What does it have to do with the crime that was just committed? What does it have to do with the crime of Binyamin, supposedly who stole this cup? What does it have to do with the fact that Yehuda says, but don't you see, Joseph, I'm responsible. I've got to bring him back. What do you want? You have a responsibility. You assume the responsibility. You come into court and you say, I'm responsible. I'm responsible. Maybe if I'd given him an education, maybe I'd given my child an education, or maybe if I had done this or that, maybe when the person came and pleaded he needed some money, I didn't give it to him, and then he went out to steal, I feel a responsibility. Have you ever anyone walk into court and say, I feel responsible and therefore don't hold this crime against the individual? We never heard of things of that nature. What is the Torah telling us here? What does Yehuda believe that this man, the second in command to Pharaoh, is going to listen to this plea and therefore free him? Free him from this supposed crime that was committed. Why? But again, what he was saying, this might be the attitude that we have. We'll blame somebody for what went wrong. Like he's saying now, something went wrong, and therefore what? Therefore now you're absolved from the crime that you just committed, etc. No. There's no way that any of these excuses, and we'll always find who is responsible. We'll always find who is responsible for our misfortune. Now, have we ever done anything wrong to warrant this case? Have we heard about people saying how good they've been all their life, and God, why are you doing this? Human nature. It's so irrelevant here. But we're talking about making a connection to Eitz HaChaim. That's a serious business. Making this connection to Eitz HaChaim is not enough that you've got all the excuses to back you up as to why now I'm entitled. There is no such thing as entitlement. We hear a lot about that in the United States. Entitlement. Nothing in the way of entitlement. Each person is responsible for his action. And when that understanding, and that's what the Torah is trying to say, these are the things, everything that Yehuda was discussing here. And there's about 10 verses, 12 verses. It keeps going on and on and on and on, repeating a story, pleading upon the sympathy of the court. But that's not the way you make connections with the Eitz HaChaim. That's not the way you make connections with Yosef. Now we can understand, because what follows is even a little more ridiculous. It says here that Joseph, reading now literally the verse, which I just want to indicate to you from the Zohar, cannot be understood. When he wanted to admit or let himself be known to his brothers, v'yitinet kolo b'fchi, and he gave his voice, or translated literally means he gave his voice in pain, in shedding a tear, whatever. And the household of Pharaoh heard. What does it say immediately after? Vayomer Yosef el achav ani Yosef. That means Joseph did not divulge who he was. In verse 2, when it says that all of Egypt heard what? Heard what? And Rashi even goes on to say, not only Pharaoh, not only the immediate household, but everybody. Well, wait a second, Rashi. I mean, what did they hear? What did they hear? Because in verse 3 it says, Vayomer Yosef el achav ani Yosef. And what else does he say? Ha'od avi chai. Is my father still alive? Wait a second. Didn't Yehuda just get through saying that if I don't return this little boy that I assume the responsibility for him to my father will die? Did he say that? Just a few verses before. And now he's saying Now Joseph says, I'm Joseph, and my father's still alive. And what did the house of Pharaoh hear before? What did they hear? We assume that when it says in verse 1, in this chapter 45, when Joseph wanted to divulge who he was, assuming that he asked everyone to leave, and then he told them who he was. And then it follows that how, we don't know, but the entire household, the whole country, heard about this. The whole country heard about what? So we assume that in verse 1 that Joseph divulged that he was Joseph. And therefore everyone heard, and word spread quickly. So the whole country knew about it. And then in verse 3 it says, and Joseph tells his brothers, I'm Joseph. And now he's asking, is my father still alive? Makes no sense. There's no continuity in this verse. But here again says the Zohar, that the idea of sequence, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, of which we're familiar with, says Joseph, says the Torah, is an illusionary concept. That today is yesterday, and yesterday is tomorrow, is what the Torah is teaching us here. There is no such thing as a sequence of events. No? You mean there is no tomorrow? Well, if we listen even to our scientists, they also support the same idea. Whether we understand it or not is not important. But they're also of that opinion. When we are discussing that Yehuda was making a connection with Etz HaChaim, then the rules that we live by, what are some of the rules? What is one of the rules? That when we are discussing here an idea, and someone is in New York, does he hear what we're saying now? The answer is yes. Why don't they pick it up? Well, there are some people are picking it up. We also at times even express our knowledge about extrasensory perception. We've heard of those things. When we put all of the information, unfortunately, it's not knowledge. The difference between information and knowledge that we had discussed. Knowledge when it becomes part of you. It's the way you live. You live with knowledge. Then knowledge is not information. It's knowledge. It's connection. Yada, knowing. Knowing is the connection. Then it's a connection. If it's not a connection, then it's merely information. Then it passes by. Not only does it pass by, but you can be sitting right here in this room and listening and not pick up what I just said. Why? That moment you thought about something else. Is that a possibility? Sure it is. So you could be listening to the words. You might even repeat the words, but you didn't hear it. So the fact that we could be here and not hear it, and we could be elsewhere and hear it, is not a problem today, with all the different terminologies and concepts that we're familiar with. Then there's an idea of quantum today. Quantum. What does quantum say? What is the dilemma of quantum? That yesterday is tomorrow, that what's happening in China is happening here, that there is no such idea of fragmentation as the familiar mind, the familiar consciousness is acquainted with. It doesn't exist. And therefore, before Joseph even admitted verbally, but that consciousness that Joseph now was prepared, because it says he could no longer restrain himself, and he wanted to make himself known to his brothers. Already the whole world knew about it. The fact that he had this idea in consciousness already triggered a complete response from the entire world. The whole world. The moment something enters our consciousness, it's picked up around the world. Not only locally, but the whole world. And therefore, when we ask the question, but he didn't tell his brothers yet. In verse 3 it says that. The answer is, the moment that Joseph had an idea that he was now going to reveal himself to his brothers, it was already known. It was already known. And what does that do? That already triggers the whole consequence of events that subsequently come back to me, and you say, what happened here? How did this come about? How did it happen to me? What did I have to do? Like Joseph was saying, what is this scenario having to do with me? Why is this happening? Don't we say that in our lives? Why is it happening? And sometimes we may not even be able to find the reasons. Some of us may not even find the reasons. And then who do we blame? God. Always God's fault. Always God's fault. Or we'll find somebody else whose fault it is, but not ours. Says the Torah that the minute that there is a consciousness that he wanted to reveal himself to his brothers, the whole world knew. The whole world knew. And that triggers whatever it has to trigger. And when he says, Ha'od Avichai, is my father still alive? Well, didn't they just get through telling him that their father is alive? He's telling him, Yehuda's telling him, that I am responsible. My father will die. It wasn't even that far back. The last sentence that Yehuda repeats, Ki ech ele el avi. How can I go back to my father? V'anar einenu iti. And this child, Binyamin, is not with me. Pen ere v'ara, I will see in this evil, asher yimse et avi, meaning my father might even die. My father might even die. He's telling him, just one verse back, just a few moments before, that his father is alive. Well, why is he asking now, Ha'od Avichai? You mean he doesn't trust him? So why is he asking him? If he thinks he'll lie about whether his father is alive or not. And more importantly, who are we talking about? Talking about Joseph. Talking about Joseph. Joseph was saying is in that level of consciousness known as quantum. No time, space, motion. Everything is known. Total control. Everything. What is Joseph's question to Yehuda? Is my father still alive? Not only that, only to indicate, and if you didn't understand anything but the idea that we cannot treat the Torah as a living document for historical purposes, if you got to that conclusion, that you no longer will treat the Torah when you read it as something which is is a description or a compendium of laws, and you walk out of here knowing that it can't be that, it's anything but that, you will have made a connection. You will have made a connection. He asks, is my father still alive? And in the same verse it says, and his brothers couldn't answer him. Because, well, they became very overwhelmed now that Joseph says, I'm your brother. I'm your brother, Joseph. And then he said, Vayomi Yosef Elacha, Gishuna Elai. Come close to me. Come close to me. I'm your brother that you sold. You sold into Egypt. He says, don't worry about it. The fact that you sold me as a slave into Egypt was for a purpose. We all understand that I had to be here. Because if I did not come down to Egypt and I did not interpret the dream of Pharaoh, then Pharaoh did not appoint me to assemble all the food, because knowing that a famine was coming after the 7 years of plenty, and we didn't live through the 80s of excessiveness. Nothing left anymore. It's all been used up, unfortunately, this country, in 10 years, used up its resources. It has plenty left, but we have a problem. Here, along came Joseph, and because of his vision and his interpretation of Pharaoh's dream, assembled all of this food, and now, don't you see, that's why God sent me here. And that's why you sold me as a slave. What about the answer to whether his father's still alive? No mention. No mention. They don't even say yes. He's alive. He's alive and well. Go up to my father and say, this is what your son Joseph says. God has appointed me here to be the ruler of Egypt, and come down immediately. Al tamo, don't hesitate for a moment. And he tells him, tell my father you'll be living in Goshen. Here he says, he's asking him a question, is my father alive? And here he's telling him, hurry up, brothers, go back to Israel, where Joseph is living, and tell him that that his son Joseph, he doesn't say his son Joseph is alive. He doesn't even say, go back and tell him Joseph is alive. He didn't say that. Doesn't say that. So said your son Joseph, God has made me the Lord. Well, why don't you say first, go back and tell him that I'm alive. I'm sure those words will be of comfort. Furthermore, knowing that you and we're all brilliant people, right? We always learn from our experiences, right? We always learn from experiences. And don't you think he maybe should have gone on the Fast Pony Express and gone back to Jacob to tell him he's alive? I mean, he's going through a whole discussion, knowing that his father is in pain after all these years, thinking Joseph was dead. What would be our normal reaction? What would be our normal reaction? Of course, get on the fastest means of transportation, go back and tell his father that he's alive. No, he's carrying on a complete conversation over here, and like he's oblivious to everything. Here he asks him if my father was alive. Now he's telling him to go back and tell my father. And we're right here at the beginning. You imagine if I had another 7 hours, or maybe 20 hours, we would be able to at least touch on most of what this week's portion. I guess I'll have to leave that for Shabbat. But just here, in these very few verses, tells you how much information is encoded in these few words. Only if you have a consciousness that when you read this, you're coming upon something that makes no sense on the surface. No sense. He didn't respond to, is my father still alive? And here he's telling him, go right back to my father. So then he didn't say, our father. He says, my father. It's only Joseph's father. So what's this about? He tells him, I've got a place all reserved for him in the land of Goshen. It had nothing to do with, here's Joseph. Joseph, tell your father you're alive. Well, why are you being concerned about where he's going to live when he comes down? Yeah, it's like your father who didn't see you for 50 years, and you call him up on the phone and say, listen, I've got a place here for you. Come on down. I mean, first thing you do is say, I'm well. How are you? No. Yeah, he did say, is my father still alive? But then as if it doesn't exist. It's gone. And then he goes on to other parts. And you would think, after this part of the conversation, now they're all ready to rush back. Now he has a confrontation with his brother Binyamin. Now, Binyamin and Joseph were born of the same father and mother. So this is a full brother. And now they go through a scenario. Each weeps on his shoulders, forgetting about their fathers. Now they're weeping on each other's shoulders, and everyone's crying. And then it says, "Ba'kol nishma beit paro." And all of this that is taking place now is being heard in the house of Pharaoh. But didn't we say before that they had heard what was going on? And it says, now, this voice, the voice, was heard in the house of Pharaoh, that the brothers of Joseph has come. What happened before? A few verses back. It's the same idea. But what the Torah is talking about is us. 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 That Joseph, on one level, Jacob, on one level, each knew of the other's existence. And there was never a time that on the level of where they were, remember you're talking about chariots. You're talking about people who are connected to the Etz HaChaim. And what do we say about the Etz HaChaim? Remember? There's no time, space, and motion. What does that mean, no time, space, and motion? That means wherever Joseph is, Jacob is. Wherever Jacob is, Joseph is. The aspect of time, of space. What about time? Will Jacob find out about Joseph tomorrow? Did he find out about him tomorrow? So did he know about it yesterday? Then what's this all about again? Is my father alive? But getting back to the first word, Vayigash, what he's trying to teach us here, and what very few people have learned over the past 2,000 years, but now in the age of Aquarius, there are more and more people who are becoming familiar with this idea, with this old idea of the Zohar, and that their lives are in effect changing, and they are in control of their lives. But only those Only those who connect with the information. If you don't connect with the information, as we said before, then you've got to live where you're living. You got to go through financial instability. Everyone does. Some recover, some don't. You have to lose your health, chas v'shalom. Some recover, some don't. But everybody goes through that. You're lying in bed, you can't move. You lost your health at that moment. Well, the doctor says after a couple of days you'll recover. Does everyone recover after a couple of days? Nobody died. The doctor's always been right. I've heard the doctor say when he says you're going to recover, the guy dropped dead too, chas v'shalom. So, the prognosis of the doctor is not always accurate. Vayigash. You want to become connected. Look at what's happening here. Pay attention. Pay attention to the questions that I have raised. Because these same questions we could ask of ourselves. They sound so ridiculous. If we just looked at the story on the surface, stories are ridiculous surface now. We now all realize it's a ridiculous story. But for most of us, our lives is a ridiculous story. The same story here. Answers we ask, questions we never give ourselves because it doesn't suit us for whatever the reasons are. This is a story about every single one of us. And it's telling us that all of these idiotic questions, the questions are not idiotic, but the verse, this section of the Torah is idiotic. If we have to treat it on a level as we read it, so we read our own lives. We read our own lives day in and day out in the same manner. There's no change. As stupid as the answers are, do you ever hear the brilliant financial experts? Today, if the market drops, he gives you all the reasons why it drops. It goes up tomorrow, he gives you all the reasons why it's going up. And yet they're in complete opposition of what he said yesterday. In one day, the whole economy of the whole world has changed so dramatically. And we accept that. We accept that in our own lives too. We speak out of our mouth one way. We understand what comes out of our mouth one way. And tomorrow, or maybe a minute later, it's the opposite. It's because we haven't come to recognize that in this world, which we call Eitz Hadat, if you live in this world and you haven't even made the effort, and I don't mean making the effort, meaning I want to be part of the Etz HaChaim. But if you're not making an effort to become part of Etz HaChaim, meaning there's absolutely no change in your life, and I see people go through their lives, no change. So I don't want to be too cruel, so I say, there are people who, when they were 6, read comic books, and when they're 60, they're still reading comic books. There are people who are involved in sports when they were young children, and they have the same love for the sport. Now, I'm not opposed to sports, certainly participation in sports as something that is good for the body and for the mind, but the same interest that we had when we were age 6, that same interest exists at age 60. Where's the change? No change. But he's grown older, he's now got a business, but he's still interested in sports. But now he has a business, and maybe it's a large business, and maybe it's this, and maybe it's that. Haven't there been any changes? The answer is the person himself hasn't undergone any change. His environment maybe undergoes changes. Maybe before he lived in a one-room apartment, and now he's got a 40-room home. But what changed? He or his environment changed? His environment maybe has improved. Has he improved? Just because now he moved from this home to that home means that he's changed? Same. Same person. And to understand what's going on here is to understand the first word. Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda representing this world, the world of Eitz Hadat, the world that we live in. He wanted to bring his world, meaning himself. It means he brought himself to where? To Joseph. Right there. And the rest of what we are learning here and all the questions that I raised and the answers is only to impress upon us how we conduct ourselves in the world of Eitz Hadat, how we conduct ourselves in the familiar surroundings, that there may never be any change. No matter what changes are taking place, that does not necessarily mean that we ourselves are undergoing any change. Therefore, when we said, Joseph says, is my father still alive? Why did you say my father? Because now Joseph is coming down because it was his intent to meet up with this world. And he's telling us everything is what? If you want to sum up a person, me. By and large, you want to know about a person? If you said me, that would sum up the person. Even the idea of we is something sometimes foreign. But me, that's constant. That's constant. The world can go by, but he stays on the same place. He stays and hasn't moved. And when he said, Ha'od Avichai, is my father still alive? Joseph didn't know his father was alive. We just got through saying Joseph on the level of Etz HaChaim. There's no yesterday, no today, and no difference in space. That means where Joseph was, he was with his father all the time. He never left his father for a moment. He's with him. But the same idea that just as in Eitz HaChaim there is no change. What does it mean, no change? There's no tomorrow. There's no yesterday. There's no space differential. There's no motion. Nothing. All known. It's the same in Eitz Hadat. All known. It's all the same. He's reading the comic book at age 6. He's still reading the comic book at age 60. Except there's one difference. What is the difference? Where are you living? If you live in Eitz Hadat, then you got to get cancer. You got to lose all your money. Chas v'shalom. All these things have got to happen. Everyone degenerates. Ask the doctor. After age 20, what happens? What happens after age 20? We begin the degenerative process. The difference between Eitz Hadat and Eitz HaChaim, both are the same. Nothing changes. Except one is degenerative and one is called Eitz HaChaim. So the only choice that is left to us is not how we can change things around us. Vayigash elav Yehuda. The only thing that we can change is ourselves. It's the only thing. What do you mean change? Can you change anything about yourself? No. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be in Eitz Hadat or you want to be in Eitz HaChaim? That's the only change we could make. The only change we could make is where you want to live. But where you live, no changes take place. Whether it's in Eitz HaChaim or whether it's Eitz Hadat, no changes take place. If you're in Eitz HaChaim, no changes. It'll always be good. It's full of life. You don't have to worry about tomorrow. All the uncertainties that we have, in this familiar lay of the land known as Eitz Hadat doesn't exist there. There it's all planned out, and here it's all planned out. Here everything must operate in a degenerative, as part of a degenerative process. People will have wealth for 50 years. Got to lose it ultimately. It's got to be lost. Social relationships have got to be lost. As if they never existed. As if they never existed. That's the life in Eitz Hadat. All that we can do is have a consciousness that there is another world of existence known as Etz HaChaim, and there, again, has nothing to do with my decisions, nothing to do with my input. It's all planned out. Planned out for a perfect existence. My free will can only determine where I want to live. What address? The address of Eitz HaChaim or the address of Eitz Hadat? And therefore, when we ask all these very questions, because he's going back and forth. He's going back and forth where he says, my father alive. Yeah, because if Joseph moves back into the realm where he was sold as a slave, but as we discussed last week, he was sold as a slave. What happened when he was sold as a slave? He was the ruler of the household. What happened when he was thrown into prison? He was the ruler, he was the warden of the prison. But he's a prisoner. He was a prisoner, and he was the warden. Can you be both at the same time? Of course. No problem. Because in Eitz Hadat, you can be the warden. You can be the controller because you're not an Eitz Hadat. But as long as you have this physical body, then you participate. So when he was saying, Ha'od Avichai, Joseph didn't know his father's alive. That's why there's no response. Remember, I asked you, why don't the brothers respond and say, yes, our father is alive? Then we said, he just even told them that their father was alive. Why is he asking if the father is alive? And they said, what happened yesterday is gone and forgotten. You don't even remember what happened a moment ago. How many times we forget what happened 5 minutes ago? In Eitz Hadat, forget it. What the Torah is telling us about Eitz Hadat, that if there's no Vayigash Elav Yehuda, if you're not trying to approach Yosef, forget it. Forget it. Stay home. Don't even go to work. It's all to no avail. All you can find there, if you're prepared to live in the Eitz Hadat, all you can find there is chaos. No matter how you wake up in the morning. And certainly this is Blue Monday. So Blue Monday, everybody feels blue, right? But it's Blue Tuesday, Blue Wednesday. Every day is blue. Every day is blue. But we can even convince ourselves that it's only Blue Monday, right? You see how far we've advanced? Tuesday, everything goes well. Only on Monday is it blue. So how come they called it Big Blue? I thought blue meant not so good, and they called IBM Big Blue. But they already saw it in the future that that IBM would become Monday. That could be. Okay, we'll stop here.